Chapter 36. Catching Up on Lost Time. Upon entering her room, Susan Pankhurst exhaled softly, as if releasing the last trace of tension from her journey. The door closed behind her with a gentle click, sealing off the world and offering her, at last, a moment of stillness. The room was exquisite, one of the guest suites in William's sprawling mansion, curated in soft ambers and deep mahogany tones, accented by hints of gold. The furnishings, though modern in form, retained an air of timeless luxury. A velvet-upholstered chaise lounge, a carved oak wardrobe, and a vanity framed with soft ambient lighting. The space smelt faintly of cedarwood and fresh linen, as if it had been aired out in anticipation of her arrival. With graceful efficiency, Susan made her way to the bed and unzipped her crimson suitcase. The moment the zipper whispered open, her presence began to unfurl through the room like perfume in the air, bold, deliberate, and unmistakably her. She removed each item of clothing with precision and care, her long fingers smoothing each fabric before placing it in drawers and hangers with military precision. The wardrobe was slowly filled with colour and texture. Silk blouses in rich hues of sapphire, emerald, and deep plum. Sharply tailored dresses with dramatic necklines and bold shoulders. Flowing skirts that swayed with elegance. And high-waisted trousers in houndstooth, crimson and obsidian black. Each piece was a statement, a mood, a mask if she needed it. Together they painted a portrait of a woman who embraced contradiction. Fierce yet nurturing. Glamorous yet grounded. Among the garments, she tucked away a carefully wrapped bundle of Siren's Embrace lace lingerie. Black, midnight blue, and a daring blush rose, each set folded as meticulously as the rest. They weren't hidden. They didn't need to be. These were not for show, nor for anyone else's approval. They were a quiet declaration of her womanhood. Powerful, unapologetic, sensual. Grace and strength intertwined in gossamer lace. Next, Susan turned to the vanity. She retrieved her compact makeup bag and placed it at the centre with reverence. The bag itself was a soft leather roll, embossed with a lotus motif. When unfastened, it unfolded like a toolkit belonging to a seasoned artist. Unlike the sleek, automated beauty masks most women her age had adopted, those impersonal chrome contraptions that could contour a face in 30 seconds flat, Susan remained defiantly loyal to the old ways. Inside her kit were her essentials, chosen not for efficiency, but for ritual. She laid them out one by one. Elysian Beauty lipstick in Rose Siren, her signature shade. Dazzling Dream Luminous Foundation, chosen for its silken blend and dewy finish. Twin Seraphine, Cosmetics Eyeliner Pens. One coal black, the other metallic gold. A compact of Luxe Glamour High Gloss Blush, its mirror etched with her initials. Every item was placed with intent, as though forming an altar to self-expression. Applying makeup for Susan had never been about vanity. It was a sacred act, part ritual, part armour, part meditation. Each stroke across her face helped her centre herself. The liner traced more than her eyes. It defined her boundaries. The lipstick wasn't just pigment, it was permission to speak, to be seen. She glanced at her reflection, not to judge, but to recognize. A small smile touched her lips. As she arranged her jewellery case and a small framed photo of a younger Nick with a custard-smeared face, in the room's rhythm, she finally paused. Her hands rested on the edge of the dresser, and she allowed herself a rare moment of stillness. This wasn't just another visit. This was her return, a quiet reclaiming of a place that had waited for her, untouched. The room was much as she'd left it, down to the heavy curtains she used to insist on drawing back every morning. And yet, everything had changed. Her fingers lingered on a folded blouse, her mind drifting. She had prepared herself for this day, rehearsed it in sleepless nights and tearful silences, but nothing could quite capture what it meant to hold Nick again. Not as a child, but as the young man he was becoming. She had seen it instantly, the grief etched beneath his smile, exhaustion in the way he carried himself, the haunted way his gaze had darted away when she mentioned their names. David and Sarah. They were her best friends. Gone. She closed her eyes briefly, not to cry. She had already done that, in Paris, in Tokyo, in hotel rooms, where their loss echoed off marble walls and hollowed out her sleep. But here she would do what she was meant to, not as a guest, as family. Susan opened her eyes and straightened, her chin lifting with quiet determination. She didn't need to fix him. She wasn't here to be a therapist or saviour. What Nick needed now was something simpler, steadier, a constant. He enjoyed a warm plate of food, a hand on his shoulder, someone who knew who he was before the world tried to remake him. Either way, she would be waiting, with her choker on, her heels polished, and her heart wide open. It was time to catch up on lost time. Soon, Susan heard a knock on the door. "Come in," she called, already anticipating who it was. The door creaked open, and Nick stepped inside, closing it gently behind him. He offered her a warm smile, the kind that came easily around people who felt like home. "So, are you settling in okay, Aunt Susie?" he asked, his voice full of that familiar warmth. "It's been a while since I last visited this place," she replied, easing herself onto the edge of the bed with a graceful motion. Her eyes drifted across the room, absorbing the comforting familiarity of it all. "But I'm glad to see everything is where I left it. William's never been the sentimental type, but he does know how to preserve memories." She looked back at Nick, tilting her head slightly. "Now then, how was your history lesson with the new teacher?" Nick chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "We were reading from the Emperor's memoirs, The Exiled Prince. I'd never really read it before, to be honest. I just remember the old drama series they made about his life. I think the series was called Crown of Ashes." Susan raised an amused brow and leaned forward, her green eyes twinkling. "Oh, really? Then humour me. Tell me what part you covered in class. Let's see if you were actually listening." Nick grinned, appreciating her teasing tone. He took a second to gather his thoughts. "Well, we got to the part where Emperor Henry was hiding in Italy after his exile. That's where he met Maria, the daughter of a vineyard owner, and they fell in love. It was because of her that he decided to go back to Britain and reclaim the throne. When he overthrew the Chancellor, he spared his life and exiled him to Wales instead of executing him. Thereafter, Henry was crowned Emperor of Britain and ruled alongside Maria and their two daughters, Emily and Elizabeth Rose." Susan gave a soft nod, visibly impressed despite herself. "That was a rather simplified version of events," she remarked, her tone playfully sharp but sincere. "But I'm glad to see you were paying attention and not dozing off like a half-dead stowaway." Nick gave a sheepish smile. "I'm trying my best." Her smile lingered for a moment, then softened with more gravity. "And that's all anyone can ask, especially with everything you've been through." She patted the spot beside her. "Come, sit with me a moment." Nick hesitated only briefly before walking over and taking the seat next to her. The mattress dipped gently beneath their combined weight, and for a moment, silence hung in the air. Comforting, not awkward. Nick felt a tightness in his chest as he summoned the courage to ask the question that had haunted him for years. The silence in the room wrapped around him like a cloak, broken only by the soft hum of the air conditioning. "Aunt Susie," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion, "there's something I need to know." Susan immediately caught the seriousness in his tone. She sat still, allowing him the space to collect his thoughts, her expression calm and patient. Nick met her eyes and spoke plainly. No hesitation, no softening of the blow. "Why did you leave after Chris died?" Susan inhaled deeply, the weight of the past evident in her features. She looked away for a moment, gathering herself before answering. "It wasn't my choice," she said at last, her voice steady but tinged with sadness. "It was your parents. David and Sarah thought I was having too much influence over you, especially after everything with Robert Hart." Nick's jaw clenched at the name. "They said teaching you my martial arts made you aggressive. They were scared, Nick. After Chris's death on that school trip to the caves at Cheddar Gorge, and then everything that happened with Robert." She paused, then continued, delicately. "They didn't want me around. They said I was a bad influence." Nick's eyes darkened. "He pushed my brother down into those caves. Then he shot Jason. He shot Jason in the spine. He paralyzed himself. And no one did anything." He spoke with raw intensity, the fury barely restrained. "He was a rabid dog, Susan. He deserved to die for what he took from me." Susan rose from the bed, her gaze heavy with concern. "That's precisely why I had to go," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "What I taught you was meant for defense, not vengeance. The teachers had to pull you off him. William arranged for therapy, an entire year of it, to keep you from being sent to a young offenders institution." "I wish he hadn't," Nick muttered bitterly, looking away. "I would have gone gladly, just to make sure Robert suffered like we did." There was a silence between them, tense, unresolved. Nick's hatred for Robert Hart hadn't dulled with time. If anything, it had grown sharper and harder. Robert hadn't just been a bully. He had destroyed something irreplaceable, and Nick had never truly recovered. Susan stepped closer, her voice now barely above a whisper. "I know, love. I know you're hurting." She wrapped her arms around him, holding him tightly, and Nick didn't resist. "But that rage you're carrying, it'll eat you alive if you let it. I understand your pain. I do. But revenge won't heal it. It only leads you deeper into the same darkness you're trying to fight." Nick stood rigidly in her embrace, swallowing hard, his throat constricted. He wanted to reject her words, wanted to hold on to the anger because it made him feel strong. But deep down, he knew she was right. "I don't know how to let it go," he admitted barely audible. Susan pulled back just enough to look him in the eye. Her smile was small and sad, but filled with hope. "That's why I'm here," she said softly. "To help you find a way. You're not alone anymore, Nick. And I'll do everything possible to help you become the man your brother would have been proud of." Nick clung to her then, burying his face against her shoulder, unable to speak. He would rather not cry, not again, but the relief of having her back, of finally being held after years of holding everything in, overwhelmed him. "Thank you, Aunt Susie," he murmured, his voice muffled and shaking. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Nick allowed himself to feel safe.